Coming up on our newscast tonight. At a forum on interregional cooperation, President Moon Jae-in shared his vision for Seoul and Moscow that improving economic cooperation with northern countries will be the source of a new growth engine for Korea's economy. U.S. President Donald Trump says he plans to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un early next year, adding there's no rush with the nuclear negotiations. As for the postponement of the Pyongyang-Washington high-level talks, Seoul's top diplomat points out the regime asked for a change of date. The UN command and the U.S. Forces Korea has a new commander. At the change of command ceremony, General Robert Abrams vows to work closely with Seoul towards a peaceful and secure Korean peninsula. NEWSCENTER begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. Let's start things off with President Moon Jae-in's comments at a forum on inter-regional cooperation. He emphasized with the latest detente in Pyongyang's nuclear deal, Seoul's government will be able to use the opportunity to build stronger economic cooperation with Russia's Far East. Shin Se-min has our top story.
President Moon Jae-in said economic cooperation with northern countries will be the source of a new growth engine for Korea's economy, and that both Seoul and Moscow should continue bolstering their cooperation through exchanges on multiple fronts. In the southeastern city of Pohang on Thursday, at the inaugural edition of a forum on inter-regional cooperation, President Moon shared his vision for both Korea and Russia, as well as the Far East.
정부는 한반도의 평화를 통해 남북러 삼각협력의 기반을 확고하게 달릴 것입니다. 극동 지역은 한반도와 유라시아의 물류와 에너지가 연결되는 핵심 지역이 될 것입니다.
The Korea-Russia Local Cooperation Forum was set up under the deal reached last year in Russia by President Moon and Putin and was initially aimed at building ties between the two countries in the fields of economy, commerce, culture, and education. It brings together representatives from 17 regions in Korea and 9 from Russia's Far Eastern Federal District. Its first edition was held at Korea's biggest steel production center, where President Moon announced the Pohang Declaration, in which the delegates agreed to 5 points, including cooperation in cutting-edge technology and the energy sector. The two sides have also agreed to set up a standing secretariat to facilitate cooperation and agreed to get more regional governments to join the forum. This is part of President Moon's new northern policy, under which Seoul is seeking to step up economic cooperation with the vast Eurasian country in multiple fields like energy, shipbuilding, and transportation, alongside the detente with North Korea. The annual meeting is scheduled to be hosted alternately by the two sides, with next year's session to be held in Vladivostok. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Staying in Pohang, President Moon was there as he resumes his tour around the country to boost regional economies. He stressed now is the time to find a new growth engine for the nation. The South Korean leader noted that the region has been the country's leading exporter of textiles, electronics, and steel, but stressed that fierce international competition and protectionism recently have made it absolutely necessary for Korea's traditional growth engines to innovate. Moon pledged to support Gyeongsangbuk-do province by enabling local companies, universities, and research institutes to work together to prepare for the fourth industrial revolution and also to support the region financially. While in the port city, the president also visited the fourth-generation light source accelerator, a facility used by researchers to analyze extremely fine particles. Washington announced its high-level talks with North Korea is postponed, citing scheduling issues. Today, Seoul's foreign minister backed this explanation and added that Pyongyang requested the change in date. For details, let's turn to our Lee Ji-won.
In a meeting Thursday of Parliament's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee, South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang said that according to the U.S., the North was the one to ask that the high-level meeting in New York be postponed. It did so, she said, because both sides' schedules were full. She added that there may have been some difficulty in terms of time, but that the State Department has publicly and definitively said that it will be held at a later date. This is in line with what the State Department's deputy spokesperson Robert Palladino said at a briefing on Wednesday, that the delay is purely a scheduling issue. Secretary Pompeo was to meet the head of North Korea's ruling Workers' Party Central Committee Kim Yong-chol in New York on Thursday, but the State Department announced that it was postponed just the day before. Still, U.S. President Donald Trump appears confident that he will hold his second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un early next year.
Sometime next year, I would say.
Sometime next year?
Sometime early next year.
At a press conference after midterm elections on Wednesday, President Trump fielded questions from reporters at the White House. He confirmed that the change in schedule was due to trips being made without much elaboration, and added that Washington is very happy with how it's going with Pyongyang. While emphasizing that he is in no rush, Trump also mentioned that the sanctions are still on and hinted that North Korea must also be responsive.
Now, I'd love to take the sanctions off, but they have to be responsive too. It's two-way street. But we're not in any rush.
But there are concerns that the two sides could be heading for a stalemate again. Reports from South Korea and the U.S., citing foreign affairs sources, say that the meeting was actually postponed because the two sides could not resolve their differences. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
The outcome of the U.S. midterm elections will not have a big impact in America's approach to North Korea issues. That's coming from Seoul's top diplomat during a parliamentary session on Thursday. Kang pointed out there's been bipartisan support in the U.S. for the Seoul-Washington alliance, as well as for peacefully resolving the North Korea nuclear issue. When asked whether the South Korean government was pushing for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul before the year's end, the foreign minister replied they are working on it, as it was agreed at the September Inter-Korean summit, but added it also depends on Pyongyang's circumstances. A motion requesting the ratification of the Inter-Korean Summit agreement signed in April has been put on the Parliament's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee's agenda. The government submitted the request back in September, and under the National Assembly Act, after 30 days, it is automatically put on the committee's agenda at its first meeting after the period, unless rival parties agree not to do so. The ruling Democratic Party has been calling for the swift ratification in order to enable smooth implementation of the April agreement. However, the conservative opposition has been against the idea, saying the exact cost of implementing the declaration has not been calculated. The nation's prime minister held a policy coordination meeting with various ministers today. Key discussion topics include ways to promote autonomous vehicles and measures to tackle the fine dust problem. Yoon Jung-min has the highlights from that session.
At a government policy coordination meeting on Thursday, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon and ministers discussed ways to promote autonomous vehicles, which are considered one of the most promising future industries for the country. The government plans to change the definition of drivers and revise laws accordingly. Until now, only humans could be considered drivers, but the revised law will also include an autonomous driving system as a driver. The government will also readjust rules in self-driving situations and scrap regulations. This will allow autonomous vehicles to drive closer together and drivers of such vehicles to use mobile phones.
The regulation reform was introduced today to remove future obstacles ahead of time.
Another item on the agenda was combating fine dust. One of the measures proposed was a policy to remove incentives given to low-emission diesel cars by 2030. The government had previously cut parking fees and congestion tolls for diesel vehicles. The so-called clean diesel policy will be scrapped as diesel cars are considered a main cause of air pollution. Meanwhile, the government said it will shut down more aged coal-fired power plants and work with neighboring countries such as China to tackle air pollution. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The Korea Development Institute says the local economy appears subdued mainly due to low domestic demand. According to the state-run think tank's monthly evaluation, exports remain strong, but investment continues to weaken. Go Roon-hee zooms in on the KDI analysis.
Researchers at the Korea Development Institute say weak demand domestically appears to have caused overall economic activity to stagnate. According to KDI's monthly report released on Thursday, exports increased but domestic demand remained weak, which held back investment and consumption. Back in August, KDI's report said the economy was improving, but it did not use that language in the 2 months after that. According to the latest report, investment in facilities decreased sharply in September, especially in the machinery sector by almost 20%. That was mainly because of fewer working days for the month. Facilities investment had fallen in August too, but by only 11%. More grim numbers came from consumption. Retail sales in September increased on-year by only 0.5%, compared to a gain the previous month of almost 6%. The durable goods sector in particular fell by almost 10% because of poor sales of passenger cars. September's industrial production also recorded negative growth, but the institute says that was only a one-off dip because of a holiday. There were some uplifting numbers in exports thanks to semiconductors. October's exports were up more than 22% on-year. Breaking it down by item, semiconductors posted more than 20% growth. But the nation's shipbuilding industry continued to struggle, marking a plunge in exports of more than 50%. Earlier this week, KDI lowered its growth forecast for the Korean economy for this year, from 2.9% to 2.7%. 고르니, Arirang News.
For years, the nation's auto industry has been a key contributor to Korean exports. Unfortunately, these days, car production, shipments, and domestic sales are all falling. Kim Hye-sung sheds light on what could be causing this turnaround.
From the GM Korea plant shutdown to Korea's #1 automaker, Hyundai Motor posting disappointing third-quarter net profits which fell by 2/3, the nation's auto industry is showing red flags. After recording production and sales of near 10 million vehicles in 2015, more than 10% of global auto market share, exports and domestic sales have started to fall sharply and are set to drop even further this year.
Korean automakers have enjoyed solid profits in recent years. This was more because they benefited from General Motors' bankruptcy and Japanese and German automakers' recall crisis rather than product competitiveness. But during this boom period, Korean automakers didn't invest as much in R&D. Korean autos fell behind market trends, playing catch-up on SUVs.
The auto industry's struggle is a concern as it not only employs 350,000 people, but also supports both upstream and downstream industries. It accounts for about 13% of Korea's manufacturing production and more than 10% of value-added goods, including steel, glass, and even financial services. Already, data shows more than a third of Korean auto parts companies posted losses in the first half this year, and a growing number are filing for bankruptcy.
Korea's auto and auto parts companies have a vertical structure. Parts companies rely more than 80% on local auto conglomerates. Eventually, to tackle this crisis, restructuring of the whole industry will be key, including raising competitiveness to fit market trends and raising productivity through trimming the workforce.
With demand for autos already slowing down in the U.S., Europe, and China, competition is becoming even fiercer. Experts also warn that the whole industry is at an inflection point, shifting towards driverless cars and electric cars, and that investing in R&D to come up with competitive cars and cooperating with ride-hailing companies and software companies is more important than ever. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
General Vincent Brooks is stepping down from his post after serving as the head of U.S. Forces Korea since 2016. At the change of command ceremony, his successor emphasized the importance of unity between the Allies' combined forces. Kang Young-woo gets us better acquainted with General Robert Abrams.
Speaking at the change of command ceremony at Camp Humphreys on Thursday, the new commander of the United States Forces Korea Combined Forces Command and the United Nations Command, General Robert Abrams, said the relationship between the two allies remains unshakable based on mutual trust, and that they will continue to work together for a peaceful and secure Korean peninsula. Emphasizing the importance of unity and commitment to each other, Abrams added that the three commands are bound by a deep and enduring relationship, which is critical to the success of their missions. The new commander faces a series of challenges, including working on the upcoming transfer of wartime operational control and maintaining defense readiness amid diplomatic efforts with North Korea.
As we pursue opportunities, it is our military responsibility to maintain a high level of readiness and fight tonight capability so that we can not only deter, but defeat external threats if we are called to do so.
Abrams graduated from the United States Military Academy in 1982. He has led a number of units in combat operations in Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Several South Korean and U.S. officials, including Seoul's Defense Minister Chung Kyung-do, attended Thursday's ceremony. Taking place in the pouring rain, the change of command ceremony showed no adversary will stop the Allies' combined forces from completing their mission. Kang, Arirang News.
Seoul and Washington concluded that one of the war remains discovered in eastern Gangwon province last year is that of a U.S. serviceman. Following 2 days of joint analysis in South Korea, the nation's defense ministry announced Thursday that the two sides confirmed the remains belong to a private from America's 7th Infantry Division, the 32nd Regiment, who was killed during the Korean War in April 1951. The remains will be repatriated to the United States later this month. The two Koreas are removing 11 guard posts each within their side of the DMZ, but have agreed to preserve 1 GP each for symbolic value. According to Seoul's defense ministry, the two sides share an understanding that some guard posts need to be retained. Thus, they each chose one considered to bear the most historical significance. Firearms and troops will be withdrawn from the guard post, but the facility itself will be preserved for peaceful purposes. The border guard post that South Korea has decided to retain is located close to the East Sea, and it was the very first such structure built in 1953. During last month's general-level military talks, Seoul and Pyongyang agreed to remove the 11 GPs in the DMZ by the end of this month. The Korea Aerospace Industries inked a deal with Indonesia for 3 more trainer aircraft. The South Korean defense manufacturer says the contract signed on Thursday in Jakarta is worth about $90 million and calls for the delivery of 3 KT-1B trainers, aircraft developed using indigenous technology. The planes are due 28 months from now. Under the deal, Kai will also install new radar equipment and machine guns on planes it sold to Jakarta previously. With this fourth order, the Indonesian military will have bought a total of 20 KT-1B trainers plus 16 T-50 trainers. Civic groups from Seoul and Tokyo joined forces to appoint a group of attorneys to file a damage suit against a Japanese company that forced Koreans into hard labor during World War II. At a press conference held at the nation's capital on Wednesday, they vowed to jointly appoint a legal team comprised of roughly 20 lawyers within this year to represent the victims against Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corporation. The move comes after South Korea's Supreme Court ruled that the Japanese company pay compensation of some $87,000 to each of the 4 Korean victims. The civic groups will later open a session to detail the procedures and contact the individuals eligible to file complaints. Over in the United States, Samsung Electronics unveiled parts of its highly anticipated foldable smartphone. Although the Korean tech giant didn't give an exact release date, American news outlets are reporting it could be sometime next year. Choi Si-young gets us up to speed with the developments.
At a Samsung developer conference in San Francisco Wednesday, the tech giant previewed parts of its upcoming smartphone with a foldable display. Although the finished product wasn't released yet, Samsung gave an overview of the new mobile display technology called the Infinity Flex Display. It provides an improved multitasking experience because the larger screen allows users to use 3 applications at once.
When it's open, it's a tablet, offering a big screen experience. Thank you.
Developers got a clear picture of what the phone is going to look like because the user interface which will be applied to the phone was revealed as well. Called the One UI, is described as a clean and minimal design, keeping the most relevant content on the bottom of the screen for one-handed use. Before its official launch in January, Samsung is first making the One UI available to people in South Korea and the US for beta testing in November. The software will be available in devices including the Galaxy S9, S9 Plus, and Galaxy Note 9. The conference provided opportunities for Samsung to garner opinions as the new technologies will require developers to tweak apps to make sure they run smoothly when the new phone hits stores.
I think we've all been waiting for the foldable phone for at least a year now, so it was nice to actually see at a developer conference that there was specs, there was something being held, that there was an opportunity to really build for it, because it's not going to be exciting if there are no apps that work for it when it does come out.
최시영, Arirang News.
The rift between carpool companies and taxi unions reached boiling point last month, with thousands of cab drivers protesting against Kakao's upcoming ride-sharing app. It has sparked a debate on whether the government should encourage the growth of sharing economy platforms or continue protecting traditional businesses and workers. Woo Si-young helped us hear both sides of the argument.
Korea's #1 carpool app was forced to downsize drastically this year, laying off 70% of its employees. It has faced legal hurdles and lawsuits, preventing it from growing further.
In other countries, they have huge carpool firms with the range of services like letting passengers transfer to public bicycles. We also want to grow, but due to murky regulations, we couldn't try even 10% of what we would have liked to achieve.
Korea was once seen as one of the global centres of the sharing economy, promoting the growth of a range of platform firms. But now those very companies are questioning whether the sharing economy is dying in the country due to red tape and strong opposition from traditional businesses. The transport laws currently ban the commercial use of private vehicles, except during commuting hours, which haven't yet been specified. Calls for regulatory reform have been drowned out by the cries of taxi unions, who worry that car and ride-sharing platforms will take away drivers' jobs. There are other unresolved issues, such as liability in the case of accidents, as well as verifying the safety of the vehicle and its occupants. Home sharing is another sector that's experiencing legal setbacks. Under Korean law, homeowners can only rent out their spaces to foreigners, not domestic travellers. Airbnb last month launched a petition to revise this act, but other accommodation businesses are worried.
With new services like Airbnb, the market share of traditional accommodation and room prices are falling. Also, many venues listed on the platforms don't meet safety standards like having fire exits, nor do they pay taxes on their income. We need more crackdowns on such cases.
Sharing platforms argue that the bar is set too high compared to other countries, and that they're actually expanding the market.
People go to hotel and stay 1 or 2 nights, whereas a lot of our guests stay longer than 5 nights. And these people have different traveling needs. Some travel with families, some may need kitchen where they need to cook their own food. So we do want to provide different options for different travelers.
While the debate rages on, most industry analysts say change is inevitable for both platform firms and traditional firms.
Even if we block services like Uber or Airbnb from operating in our country, there will be some other innovative service that challenges our current industrial landscape. The government needs to take action considering the various conditions and trends in an industry-specific manner.
Finance Minister Kim Dong-yeon last week stressed the need to foster the sharing economy, despite the initial growing pains of regulatory reform, to expand the pie as a whole and create more jobs for respective sectors. Woo Si-young, Arirang News.
And this just coming in, another gun violence incident in the United States. A gunman walked into a Southern California bar on Wednesday night local time and opened fire, shooting down and killing at least 12 people and 10 others were injured. The police said the gunman died inside the bar. Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, it's still raining across the country and some places are due to get heavy downpour through the night.
That's right, Daniel. Heavy rain advisories are in place for Busan and parts of Gyeongsang-namdo province. Now, the rain is expected to ease slowly after midnight until the morning. But until then, the northern provinces and Jeju are expected to get up to 40 millimeters and a little less over in the south. Along with the rain, watch out for those strong winds as well. By Friday afternoon, the rain clouds will clear out and the nation will see sunny skies. Beijing will have similar weather tomorrow, while Tokyo is warmer but cloudier. Your Friday commute to work won't be too cold, with Seoul kicking off to 9 degrees Celsius. Busan and Jeju are warmer at 13 and 14 degrees respectively. A damp morning should turn mostly sunny skies, but the air quality is expected to turn bad under the mild highs, Seoul reaching up to 16 degrees and Daegu and Gyeongju will hit up to 17 and 18 degrees. The weekend weather looks great, but toxic levels of the dust will continue, and by next week, morning lows will drop significantly. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you on tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.
2018 Overseas TV Audience Survey. Arirang TV and Gallup Korea are conducting research on viewer opinions. Your honest answers will be used for the development of Arirang TV. From November 1st to the 24th, you can participate in the survey through our website, www